Hello everyone and welcome back. If you're new to my channel, my name is Sophie. I finally made a video because every good YouTube channel has a video, so I finally made one. I haven't done videos in a while. I've been super busy with school and stuff because like Keystones are coming up and we had a bunch of tests last week, but now it's spring break, so I have an entire week to just make videos. So today I'll be talking about Midnight Sun, a novel that is connected to the Twilight series. It's the book Twilight in Edward's perspective. There's a reason there's a pomegranate on the front, which actually makes sense, and none of the other symbols make sense. The reason there's a pomegranate on the front is because he makes a lot of references to Persephone and Hades in the Greek story. So, in the story of the Greek gods, Persephone ends up going to the underworld with Hades, and when she eats pomegranate seeds, she's doomed to the underworld. Which is basically what he's saying is happening to Bella, because the more she's with Edward, the more pomegranate seeds she's taking, and the more she's doomed to Edward's underworld. So one thing I really disliked about this book was Edward thinks so much. There's like 5 pages of Edward basically just talking about Bella, and it's ridiculous. He has so many thoughts, and it's annoying sometimes, because you're like, just get to the good part, just get to the reality, let's get out of Edward's head, which was me a lot. Something that I really liked about this book is that Edward knows everyone's thoughts. So you know what basically every single person is thinking except for Bella. So you would always know what the others were thinking because Edward would read their thoughts. You also knew what happened when Bella wasn't there. So you knew more about Edward's family, you learned more about his brothers and his sisters, and why Rosalie really didn't like Bella in Twilight. You learn more about that in Eclipse, but you learn about it more in a little bit of Midnight Sun because Edward sees it firsthand. You also know what happens. So Bella's out for a few days after James, the vampire, basically nearly kills her, and you know everything that happens within that time frame. You also get to see a lot more of the vampires and less of the humans. So you can understand the vampires' thoughts more and everyone's thoughts more when what they're thinking. Like when Bella was first at school, what was everyone thinking? What were their thoughts that Edward and Bella were dating? And you also learn that Jacob and his family are werewolves much before. But I already read the series, so I already knew. But you learn about it much before because Edward knows about it. Another thing I liked about this book was Alice's visions. Because Alice has visions of, she can see the future. And she does see the future several times in the book. And Edward always knows what it is because he's always looking in her mind. So you learn a lot more about what's going to happen in the future because Alice has vision. Now this book is very similar to Twilight. It's in the same time frame and it also has the same ending of prom. So, let's see, how do I put this? This book was a bit disturbing, if I'm being honest. There was a lot of Edward's thoughts that were either just TMI or were just flat out disturbing. Like there were some points where I was like, oh, Edward, you really shouldn't be thinking that. Or, oh, Edward, I don't think that's what she means. Like, Bella's thoughts are very confusing because he can't understand her thoughts, and there were a lot of times where I'm like, yeah, you don't really know what Bella wants. Or there were times where I was like, you really shouldn't be thinking about that, you should be thinking about this instead. Because there were a lot of times where it seemed like he enjoyed Bella's physical appearance more, and her scent more than her personality. I mean, obviously he likes her personality if he loves her, but he seemed to be more interested in her physical appearance and in her scent, which is not what you should be focusing on with the girl. You should be interested in their personality more, not just their appearance. You should really be focusing mostly on their personality, because the more you know them, the cuter they seem in reality. So the more you know about their personality, the more you're attracted to them. So if he had known her personality more, he could have been even more attracted. Yes, he's very attracted to her now, but he could have been more attracted romantically and personality-wise instead of physically if he focused more on her personality. There honestly isn't a lot to say about this book unless I go into details, and I'm pretty sure everybody's read Twilight. So if you've read Twilight, you mostly know what happens in Midnight Sun, and I don't just want to repeat the Twilight story. And it's very, very, very long, so I'm not really going to go into it. You also get to see a lot about Edward's past. He talks a lot about his past life before he, right after he became a vampire, and what he did when he was a vampire, and a time that he left Carlisle and when he came back. Another thing that I disliked about this book, it was just really, really long. I finished it faster than I expected, but I also finished it over the course of a few days, and then I had the weekend, and I was really into it. It was a little boring, but I think that the reason it was long and boring for me was because I had already read Twilight, and I already knew basically the gist of what was going to happen and how it was going to happen and in what direction things were going to go. So I would recommend this book, but I wouldn't recommend it if you don't like rereading stories. If you don't like rereading stories, I wouldn't recommend this. If you just want to see what's in Edward's head, I wouldn't read the entire thing, because basically just a redo of Twilight, just in Edward's perspective. It is interesting to see it in the mind of a vampire, but if you don't like rereading stories and you don't like long books, I would definitely not recommend this to someone who doesn't like long books and doesn't like rereading stories. I'm gonna say you could read Midnight Sun instead of Twilight, but I would recommend Twilight first instead of Midnight Sun. You could read Twilight, Midnight Sun, New Moon, Eclipse, and then Breaking Dawn, because it doesn't really matter when you read Midnight Sun. I would just recommend that you read Twilight before you read Midnight Sun, because seeing it in Bella's mind and then seeing it in Edward's mind, if you see it in Edward's mind, you have a very different perspective on what way the story will go because of Edward's thinking process and how much he thinks. Because, to be honest, if all of the books were in Edward's thoughts, the books would be so thick. This is maybe about as thick as Breaking Dawn, and Breaking Dawn is very, very thick. So I would recommend reading those books first and then reading Midnight Sun, or reading Twilight and then Midnight Sun. But yeah, I definitely think I liked it better in Bella's perspective than in Edward's. So I guess that's it for this video. I would really appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up, and I would love if you would subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.